So my invitation from this session is for you to start getting curious and paying attention or shining the light of awareness on the two different voices that live inside of you. Is this fear talking, or is this the wiser, more resourced part of me talking? Because one is more trustworthy than the other. I know now that in order to be the most fully expressed version of me, I cannot live a fear-based life. And I need to be able to discern the difference between the voice I can trust, which is the more wise part of me, and the voice that is not trustworthy, which is the fear-based part of me. Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here, we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it. And let's do it together. Okay, we're going to start today's episode with a question. Have you ever noticed how quickly your mind fills in the blanks when you feel activated? Someone doesn't text you back. A friend seems quieter than usual. Your boss sends an email asking if you have a minute to talk tomorrow. Or maybe the new person you're dating asks to talk to you later. The dreaded, can you talk later? Within seconds, your mind already has a story. Sometimes it's accurate, and sometimes it isn't. What's fascinating is that our bodies often respond to these stories long before we even vet out whether they are true or not. Our heart will race, our stomach tightens, we feel anxious, and we start looking for evidence. We replay conversations, we imagine what's going to happen next. Most of us have no idea how much power our thoughts have over the way we experience our lives. Now, when I first started my major healing journey, I really wasn't paying too much attention to my thoughts. I was paying a lot of attention to my feelings because my feelings were on fire and they felt overwhelming. So naturally, I wanted to triage what was burning me the most. And I wanted to understand my feelings. Like, why did certain situations create so much anxiety for me? How could one interaction stay with me for hours or even days? Why did my nervous system react so strongly sometimes? And as I started to lean into my feelings, and it's a lot of the work that I've shared on the podcast, I realized my feelings weren't only responding to what was going on in my environment. They were also responding to the stories I was telling myself about what was happening. I mean, the event can happen once. The story can repeat hundreds and hundreds of times. And if you know, you know. Someone doesn't text you back. That's the event. Everything that comes after is the story. They must be upset with me. I have clearly done something wrong. Maybe I said something wrong that made them pull away. Maybe they're over my BS and they don't even want to be my friend anymore. Those are the stories. Now, hear me out. They might be true. They also might not be true. But our nervous system doesn't wait to find out. It begins responding immediately. Remember when we talked about attachment style, I said if your attachment system is activated, it is always alerting you that there is a threat in your environment or in the story you're telling yourself. That realization, coupled with the work that I've done with Mike Morris over the years, I started to get curious about my thoughts. And instead of just focusing on my feelings, why am I so anxious, I was able to also incorporate what story could I be telling myself right now? I'm a big pattern person. It just makes a lot more sense to me. So as I started going, okay, well, like one part of creating a safe relationship with ourselves is having a healthier relationship to our thoughts. So I started researching it. And that question eventually led me to something in psychology called cognitive distortions. Personally, we can call them by, the big fancy psychological term, or we could just refer to them as fear-based thought patterns. And these fear-based thought patterns or cognitive distortions are some of the most common ways that our mind tries to protect us when we feel a sense of uncertainty. These things happen automatically, and they're absolutely a part of our human experience. In fact, they're so common that psychologists have spent decades studying them. Personally, what I love about them is I'm not huge on labels, but I love that we can name them. Because once something has a name, we can recognize it. And once we can recognize it, we have a choice. Instead of automatically believing every thought that comes into your mind, you can become curious about it. You can ask, is this fear talking? Is this one of those familiar thought patterns? And ultimately, is this the voice within me I can trust? Because the truth is, there is a voice in us we can't trust, and there is a more trustworthy voice. And I think it's a huge shift we can make in this work. Because what I've learned is that every thought that comes into our minds deserves to be heard, but not every thought deserves to be believed. And there's a big difference. Our maladaptive protector has an important job. It's constantly scanning for danger. It's trying to keep us safe. It's trying to prevent us from being hurt in familiar ways in the future. Now, the problem is we can't always distinguish between what's happening and what might happen. And that maladaptive protector doesn't distinguish between facts and fear. And what I've found, and I've seen so much in this work, is that when fear takes over, we have a tendency to leave the present moment. We travel into the future trying to predict what might happen. Or we'll travel back into the past, replaying what already happened. Hell, sometimes we'll travel into someone else's mind to figure out what they're thinking, all in an attempt to create certainty, security, or control. Because uncertainty and feeling powerless is an extremely vulnerable experience for us humans. So listen, the question is not, will you have fear-based thoughts? You will. You'll have them today. The question is, will you recognize them when they show up? Because awareness starts the ball rolling. That's where change starts. So I don't know why I constantly use alarm analogies, but it's what makes sense to me in this work. So I think our thoughts can be a lot like a smoke detector. They're designed to get our attention. Sometimes they're alerting us to something really important, like there's a fire and we better get the F out. Sometimes they're reacting to burnt toast. So just like the alarm, our job is to get curious. What is the actual threat? Is there evidence that I'm in danger, or is my protective mind trying to keep me safe? Am I truly in danger, or is it some burnt toast? So next, I would love to introduce you to some of the most common fear-based thought patterns. And as we go through them, I don't want you to worry about memorizing the names. I just want you to notice. See if you can recognize yourself. Because my guess is you're going to meet yourself somewhere in this list. So keep in mind that we are not typically doing this all day long. These cognitive distortions or negative thought patterns come up when we are activated. So the first cognitive distortion is mind reading. This is when our minds become convinced we know what someone else is thinking without actually having enough information. For example, have you ever sent someone a text and they responded with, okay, or just one word, or, oh, they hearted it? Immediately, your mind starts working and telling stories. They're upset with me. That sounded short. I'm in trouble. I must have said something wrong. Or maybe you're in a meeting. You share an idea and no one says much. And now your mind has decided that they hate your idea. So the interesting thing about mind reading is that we're trying to solve a mystery that can't actually be solved from inside our own heads. Our minds do not like unanswered questions, so they answer them. The big problem is fear usually is the loudest voice. And if you've been hurt before, fear is likely to tell a story that protects you from being hurt again. So those stories, they're upset, they don't like me anymore, they're pulling away. It feels convincing, but it isn't necessarily true. I worked with a person one time who every time her boyfriend would take a while to write her back, she would call all the local hospitals because her fear was telling her that he was dead and she needed to find him. So a part of our work was giving a certain amount of time before she reached out to the local hospitals to see if he was dead, which he was never dead, by the way. He's most likely still alive, and that was a long time ago. But I know for me that sometimes it's laughable because I can be like, oh, this person doesn't like me anymore. Or I must have talked too much when we were together, or said something I shouldn't have said. And then they respond back with sorry, I was in Europe and didn't have service or something. And I'm like, oh, why did I torture myself for those 24 hours? So I try to ask myself, what evidence do I have to back that story up? Typically, it's not much. And I'm not saying listen, sometimes your intuition comes up and you're like, no, something's off. So this isn't to talk you out of believing your intuition. But there is a big, big difference between your fear-based thinking and your intuition. So as we get to know ourselves more deeply, we get to see the difference between the two. But what I constantly remind myself of now is either way, even if this is a misunderstanding or this person actually has shifted or the connection has shifted and I'm picking up on it, I'm not going to leave me. I will stay with me in the rejection. I will really work hard on not rejecting myself in the rejection, not abandoning myself in the abandonment. And at the end of the day, not knowing is uncomfortable, but telling yourself scary stories makes your biosphere that you live in a really scary place to live. And there's a high likelihood you're going to do whatever you can to get out of it. Now, another cognitive distortion or negative thought pattern is called fortune telling. This is when our minds become convinced that they know the future. So have you ever thought about applying for a job or starting a business, having a difficult conversation, setting a boundary, asking someone out on a date or trying something new? And before you've even taken the first step, your mind has already written the end of the story. They're going to say no. It won't work. I'll embarrass myself. They're just going to get angry anyways. So nothing has even happened yet, but your body is already reacting to a future that doesn't exist yet. And of course, this is one of the ways that fear is trying to protect us, although maladaptively. Because what it's saying is if we expect disappointment, it won't hurt as much. Well, guess what? Disappointment stings every dang time. So does rejection. So does abandonment. So do any of these kind of crappier feelings. So it actually doesn't work. I don't think that it helps to lessen the disappointment. I think that there's a high likelihood we're just going to suffer more. We suffer in our imagination. And then again, if something difficult actually does happen. So anytime I find myself time traveling, anytime I see clients time traveling, we name it. And sometimes I'll even ask, hey, where are you right now? I had a client that was feeling extremely disappointed, and I was listening to her share what was currently going on. And then it started leaving this present moment and going into the future. We made it all the way until she was in her 90s, and in actual time, she was in her 20s, to where she was going to die alone and without a relationship. And sometimes we can laugh about it, of course, not to poke light at where somebody currently is, but sometimes humor is just a lovely tool in this work. And I'll just kind of stop and go, hey, where are you right now? And they're like, I'm sitting in my home office. And I'll go, okay, but we just went all the way to when you were 90 and dying alone and a cat lady or whatever. And usually the clients will laugh because we are so far out in the future that there's absolutely no way we can prove it. And there's absolutely no way that we can prep for something like that. So my tool, anytime I catch myself time traveling, which means I am in the future or I am in the past and I am not in the current moment, my job is to catch it, name it. Oh, I'm time traveling, come back into this moment and choose one thing I can do in this moment. And a huge thing that anybody can do is watch the scary stories you are telling yourself. Now, the next cognitive distortion or negative thought pattern is a close cousin to fortune telling. It's called catastrophizing. And holy smokes, do I see this one all the time. This is when the mind doesn't simply predict the future, it predicts the worst possible future. One missed phone call becomes something terrible happened. One mistake at work becomes I'll probably get fired. Your teenager is 20 minutes late going home and your mind has already imagined a horrific accident. Let me tell you, my son just turned 16. That shit is real. Again, you can see what the mind is trying to do. It's trying to prepare us. Somehow it believes that if we rehearse the worst case scenario enough times, we'll be safer if it happens. Some good words to pick up on if you're catastrophizing is always and never. I will always be like this. It will never change. Those are very absolute language. It's very black and white language. But here's what I've learned about catastrophizing. Preparing and rehearsing aren't the same thing. Preparation or intention leads to action. Rumination, which is playing things over and over again in your mind, leads to exhaustion. If I'm worried about finances, preparation might help me make a budget. Maybe I update my resume, save money where I can. Those are purpose-driven actions. Rumination just keeps replaying the same frightening movie over and over again. Catastrophizing is something that my brain can regularly go to when I am feeling like something continues to happen over and over again in my head. So I remind myself, even if something difficult happens, even if the worst case scenario happens, I don't have to face it today. And I don't have to face it alone. The future version of me will have more experience than I have today. More wisdom, more information, more support, more growth. And I trust that the future version of me will be able to show up to future problems. For today or this moment, I just get to handle what's in this moment. Now, I think this is relatable to people, or maybe not, but I think it is. My anxiety tells me that people are going to die all the time. Like if somebody calls me and I'm busy and it's taken a few days for me to get back to them, I'm like, oh, what if they die, Robin? Or anytime someone I love leaves, oh my gosh, what if they die? So one thing that I've used for that, because I know I'm not the only one that does that, is I come back into this moment and I remind myself, oh, Robin, in this moment, they're alive. I think this is something that can happen when we have aging parents too. In this moment, they're still alive. And how do you want to be in a relationship with them in this moment? So the more I started paying attention to these thought patterns, the more I realized that they all have something in common. Every single one is trying to answer a question that you cannot currently answer. Every single one is trying to create certainty. And I get it. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. And our protective parts don't like sitting in the unknown. They want answers, control, and they want to know what's going to happen. They want reassurance that everything is going to be okay. So our minds fill in the blanks. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they are completely wrong. But what's at the root of this is our thinking is trying to solve problems we don't actually have enough information to solve. So this leads me to my next thought pattern. This one's called fortune telling. I think of it as fear trying to convince us it has a crystal ball. So have you ever caught yourself saying, this conversation is going to go terribly? They're never going to understand. I'm going to fail. This relationship is never going to work. I'll always be alone. If I do that, I'm probably just going to embarrass myself. Nothing has happened yet. The conversation hasn't taken place. The presentation hasn't been given. Boundary hasn't been set. And the interview didn't even happen yet. But your body is already reacting. Why? Because your mind has time traveled into the future and written a story. Now, this one I laugh about with my clients because sometimes in a really loving way, I will say, hey, listen, I really like you, but I would not pay you money to tell me my future. And then, strangely enough, I think about it, I don't think I know one psychic or intuitive that can read their own future. So maybe we're not qualified to be predicting our future. Maybe the next best step is we stay in this moment, do what we need to do to feel safe in this moment, and then meet any future moment that comes our way with the knowledge, tools, awareness, and consciousness that we have at the time. Now, something else that's worth noting is that when we're in states of activation, have you ever noticed how quickly your mind makes something about you? It certainly seems that blaming ourselves feels more powerful in moments of powerlessness than accepting we don't have control over someone else's thoughts, feelings, or choices. At least if we make it about, in our maladaptive thinking, if we make it about ourselves, it feels like we have more power. So remember, if something difficult happens 6 months from now, the version of me that meets it won't be today's version. She'll have 6 more months of experience, 6 more months of growth, 6 more months of learning, 6 more months of wisdom, and 6 more months experiencing life. I can lean into trusting the future version of me. Just like years ago, I could not have imagined the tools I have today. If someone would have told me that I would have a podcast, just a podcast, that would be pretty far-fetched, let alone a podcast helping hundreds of people, talking about life and relationships, I would have fired that psychic immediately. But life gave me those tools as I needed them. And that's how growth works. We grow into our challenges. We don't have to already know how to handle every hard thing we'll ever face. Now, my last cognitive distortion we're going to cover is called emotional reasoning. It's when we assume that something is true because it feels true. I feel rejected, so I must be rejected. I feel like I'm failing, I must be failing. I feel like a burden, I must be one. Now, don't get me wrong, feelings matter. And remember, the way that I teach it is that feelings are communicating a need. They're so important. They deserve our attention and they're full of information, but they aren't always factual. There's a great saying, feelings aren't facts, but they're good information. I hear this in my work almost daily. People will come in and talk about something as if it's factual, and they will use the words, I feel like a loser. I feel like I'm behind. And I always identify that language. I'll say, oh, okay. Well, I noticed something. You use the word feel, not it's been proven, not even I think. I feel like a loser. What they're telling themselves is I'm a loser, but it's interesting information that we're using the word feel, because it just lets us know feelings aren't facts, but they're good information. You are feeling like a loser. That does not mean you are a loser. So of course, all of this work intertwines, and I don't think we can talk about scary stories and the way we talk to ourselves and the fear that presents itself as truth without talking about your parts of self. Because most of the time, at the core of that fear is a younger part of you that wants to know you're going to be okay. And I know that sometimes it's hard to differentiate between, is it my inner child speaking? Is it my inner teenager? But when those parts become activated, they don't usually scream, I'm scared, or help me. Instead, they tell stories that make sense of what they're feeling, that try to prepare you and try to protect you. But the more I've paid attention to those patterns, the more I've realized those thought patterns are often just the language of fear. They are not the language of wisdom, and they most certainly are not factual. And I think it's a huge, important distinction to make in this work, that fear has a voice and wisdom has a voice, and they do not sound the same. Fear needs certainty. Wisdom can tolerate uncertainty. Fear is urgent. Wisdom can slow down and pause. Fear assumes. Wisdom gets curious. Fear wants answers immediately. Wisdom can co-create with the universe and the universe's timing. Fear wants control. Wisdom is looking for the next aligned step. Fear tells me I have to figure out my entire future today. Wisdom reminds me that I can do one thing in this moment, but I can't do all things. So my invitation from this session is for you to start getting curious and paying attention, or shining the light of awareness on the two different voices that live inside of you. Is this fear talking, or is this the wiser, more resourced part of me talking? Because one is more trustworthy than the other. I know now that in order to be the most fully expressed version of me, I cannot live a fear-based life. And I need to be able to discern the difference between the voice I can trust, which is the more wise part of me, and the voice that is not trustworthy, which is the fear-based part of me. Now let's bring in the conscious adult. The conscious adult doesn't have to panic when fear shows up. It actually expects fear to show up, because fear is part of being a human. My goodness, are we on a roller coaster ride here in this thing called life? I don't even know how I got here or where I'm going. I mean, I have some ideas, but I can't prove it to you. The conscious adult doesn't shame fear. It doesn't even need to get away from it. It listens first, and it understands why fear is here. Then it responds. Now, I know not everybody thinks this about me, but I am not comfortable being a public facing person. I pull it off here and I can get on and do these things, but sometimes it's a little bit gnarly for me. What I've realized over the course of my work is like, I used to think I have to get rid of the fear to be able to do this. My goodness, if I didn't cover every single one of these cognitive distortions before I did this podcast, Lord, I had to get through each and every one of them. And what I realized is fear just is a part of the process a lot of times, and especially when we're doing something new. So instead of trying to get rid of it, at least I haven't done a workshop in person in a hot minute, but when I used to, I would literally be like, okay, I have my computer, I have my cords, I have my notes, I have my anxiety, let's go. And I also can attune to that fear. I can say, hey, okay, there's a part of me that is scared of this experience. What do you need to be able to step forward in doing something new and something risky? One of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves, if not the greatest gift, is developing the safest voice within us. So maybe you're listening today and going, okay, check. I do all of these fear-based thought patterns when I get activated. Now what? Well, let me tell you, the next step is not trying to stop them, because I don't think that is possible. And I don't think it's just trying to think positively all the time. The first step is simply noticing, give it a name. Oh, I think I'm mind reading. I think I'm doing that thing. I think I'm catastrophizing. I think my brain is fortune telling again. It's amazing how much the light of consciousness can shine on things when we're aware we're doing it. And then, of course, the next step is this true? Or coming back into this moment, or using the Sedona method that Mike Morris talked about, or Byron Katie's work, or the 3 lies of the ego. But start noticing that not only do you have behavioral patterns, you also have thought patterns, and they're impacting your day-to-day life and relationships. So my invitation for you this week is don't try to change your thoughts. Just notice, name it, get curious, and ask yourself, what story is my mind telling me? And is that story based in fact? And remember that your conscious adult, it won't leave you. It won't leave you in fear, shame, rejection, abandonment, but it might just come in with wisdom. It might remind you that you're capable. It might remind you that no matter what comes your way, you will face it together, because awareness really is the beginning of change. Our thoughts may not stop, and fear may still have something to say. The difference is it doesn't have to make every decision. So keep growing, and I'll see you next week. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.